I'm going to today take you all, you can, yes, sir. I'm going to today, what my plan is to take you all not just to an understanding of what is gender and what is gender equality or inequality as we see it more in the world today. I'm going to talk to you more importantly on issues of masculine toxicity and how gender impacts men as much as it does when we talk about women. Because, I've been a person who's been speaking on gender equality for many years now. And very recently, I was just telling Subramanya sir that we've started an optional elective in our university on gender and politics, which I taught to a bunch of computer science and IT students this semester. And they were clueless as to what gender means. But I know we have wonderful budding young lawyers here who definitely don't need to be told what is gender, right? Still, why don't we look at what do we understand by the term gender? Yes, man, woman, right? The two signs there. And we have the idea of equality. Again, two very significant socio-cultural, political, legal terms. And when we bring the two together, we have a concept that we explore, and that is gender equality, right? And that is why you have that, can we really put women and men equally on the scales? Does that really stay as it is, right? I'm sure you all have also seen a lot of graffiti and memes as to how on these scales, when a woman is multitasking and juggling so many issues, she is definitely, weighed down by it. Whereas, she's doing house duties, she's doing work, she's doing the nurturing, she's doing everything, whereas men maybe are not doing it. So that is where the starting point comes in, right? What is gender? But my dear friends, today gender does not just simply mean this. It's no longer the male and the female binary, right? Now, what was one of the most important events that took place in the world in January this year? Anybody? What happened in January in the world, which really is impacting everybody's lives, however much we may say that isn't? Anybody? We had Donald Trump taking over as the President of the United States of America, right? And what is the first thing that he did? One of the first presidential decrees, what did he do? Absolutely. He said that there is no third gender. So in February, we had an international conference in our university on the state of gender equity on the Asia Pacific, where we had renowned speakers from all over the Asia Pacific coming and speaking. And when I was giving the vote of thanks at the inaugural session, I started by saying that I'm really most thankful that I'm standing here in a country where we do not say that gender is just man and women, right? And where we do not say that women do not have the right to reproductive rights on their own body. So think about it. My own daughter is studying in the US. I know all of us have this, image that, oh, the most powerful country, the biggest, nation in the world. But they really regressed back because they went back to this point that the word gender is only the male-female binary. And you and I know very well today that that is not so. When I was teaching gender studies 10 years ago, I would begin with this slide, and I would perhaps not mention the last bit. The last bit would be left for the last slides. Today, we talk about gender, and on our very first slide, we have to accept that we have gone beyond the binaries to the diversity. We say that gender is an umbrella. Gender is not, my friends, just the binary of male and female. It encompasses even more. Like, this is just LGBTQI, it's I plus, there's a lot more, right? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, queer, intersex, it's everybody has the right to identify what they are. Again, the word gender today, when I'm talking to you in April 2025, is not feminism. It's not women's rights only. If you're not, anybody who does gender is not a bra-burning feminist who's taking a jhola and just walking and saying, women don't have rights, right? That was how Indian feminism started, even before India got independence. So this is what it is not. If I'm talking gender and anybody is talking gender to you, please don't think narrowly that it's only feminism, it's only women's rights. No. It's very much the conversation about other sexualities. And so I think it's my duty that if I ever get a place on a stage to talk to youngsters today, when the word gender just comes in, to first say this out. Because I'm always asked at the end, ma'am, you did not talk about the LGBTQ, or ma'am, you did not talk about men, right? Today we do it all, okay? Now, so what is gender? And I'll come to gender justice very soon. I'm sure you all know it, like you know your A, B, C, D, E, F, but I still think it's very important for us to reiterate this point, that gender is different from sex. Gender is not something biologically determined. Your sex is what is given to you and you get to know at your birth. That's not what gender is. Gender varies from culture to culture with economic, social, and political context. You and I are sitting in this air-conditioned big auditorium in Bangalore, the capital city of Karnataka, IT capital, and having conversations on gender. Do you think a poor Dalit girl of your age in a rural hamlet somewhere in interior rural areas of Karnataka can actually dare to have these conversations with her family? Not at all, right? So within a few 100 kilometers from here, where you and I are here today, culture to culture, the economic viewpoint differs. Let's make it immediately political. We have Pakistan on one side, and just if you go beyond the other side of Pakistan's border is the country called Afghanistan, right? Anybody? What's happening there right now? Anyone? And what has the Taliban done? Put all the girls inside a black room like this, right? You know, people in Afghanistan, I used to have PhD scholars from Afghanistan. One of them who used to work in the president's office, and he used to join online classes. They were one of the first ones who fled when Taliban took over, you know, and Kabul collapsed. Now, we are just again on the same axis, Global South, 2025, but we have regressed there. Their political reality is very, very different. Their social reality is very, very different, right? While society allows us to open our hair, right? To talk, walk around, showing our arms. When I visited Iran, the social reality there, the women there too are really smart, very forward, very well educated. But not one bit of skin will show, right? They need to continuously cover their hair and their skin. In fact, the police would pick you up from the streets if your chunni just fell off your head. And it was for everybody. Now that's the social reality. That's how the country runs because of its religion and because of its politics. So the idea of gender definitely varies with these indicators. And you can just look around a lot more around you to get many more examples. I'm sure all of you know that India never discriminated. We gave women and men equal rights to vote when we launched our constitution, right? It's not that women got voting rights later. We got it in 1950. Everybody in this class knows that. You know, in America, they didn't do that. The American Constitution did not. Women had to go through torture, jail. The suffragette movement there, women had to, even the most powerful country, the first oldest democracy, they discriminated. And they got their rights much later. So there are a lot of indicators through the lens of which we view gender. Gender thus varies over time. And a young girl in this room and a young girl sitting in Afghanistan today or sitting in militarized Myanmar again today is also thinking and wondering about it. What rights we give to people, we take it back. What rights you had one day maybe all just slip away from your hands. So the temporal factor is very important for us when we understand what gender is. Now, I don't have the time for it in today's inaugural lecture, and so I won't take you through it. But whenever I begin my conversation on gender rights, I usually do activities of roles and, activity. I give you various roles and I say, tell me, does a man do it or does a woman do it? The fact is that our understanding of gender, a little boy or a little girl, if anyone of you have little children in your homes, they don't know that they're a boy or they're a girl. We teach that to them. We tell them, put your frock down, don't jump around like a boy. Right? We tell the boy, don't go and play with the doll. We are appalled if a little boy goes and wants to play with a doll. Right? They don't know this. They are taught. We teach them this. So, we learn our gender roles. Now, if I ask you, whom do you think a farmer? Farmers in our country are more men or more women? Women. Farmers? More women? Yeah? In a state like Haryana, where I did my PhD fieldwork, definitely because the men are lazy, they're either drinking or having hookah at homes. So the women are out wearing shirts and petticoats in the heat and in the fields, right? I would only see women in the fields. But your farmers are mostly men. If you want to do a sex aggregated data across the country. So you think farming as an occupation is women. But if I tell you who does gardening in your house, you'll say, oh, my mama does it, right? Who's a tailor, Master Ji? A man in your head. Who stitches you are supposed to stitch your button at home? Oh, it's your wife or your sister or your mother. These are all roles that we make in our heads. Chef hat. Oh, definitely men. Very few women in in a chef's room or a chef's kitchen in an official restaurant. But definitely a mom is supposed to cook your lunch, dinner and all, right? So in fact, when I ended the gender and politics course just 2 weeks ago, one of the boys who's from Karnataka and who took that elective course that I taught came up during the finale day and when we were having reflections, and he said, ma'am, after your course, I'm very angry at my mother. I said, oh my God, now what did I do? He said, no, I got late because she hadn't given me breakfast and she was getting late, and I was angry with her that why did she not teach me how to cook? I could have been able to make my breakfast myself, right? So I was like, my boy, what stops you from going and learning yourself, right? But the fact is that this is something that's there in your head. What we are told, what we see around us, we imbibe. Now the beauty of that is that that can change also, right? If it is not fixed in stone, then we can change it. But then, with the change comes disapproval. If you're a man and you identify as a male gender and you are doing feminine things, then you will not get approving looks from many people around you. Similarly, if you are a woman and you say that you are of the feminine gender and you do manly things, then maybe that's not really looked on. Why? Because we have in our society divided jobs and tasks, traditionally, right? Now, it is important therefore for us, and which is what I'm going to get into today, is to understand how gender operates through relationships. How do each one of us interact with what we understand with gender, and how does gender operate with each other? It is through these social relationships that the word gender really uncovers itself. So the conceptual distinction between sex and gender was developed by Anne Oakley, and it is a very useful analytical tool to clarify ideas, and that now has been universally taken up, that it is not biologically determined, but it is socially constructed. And so according to this distinction, sex is connected with biology, whereas the gender identity of men or women at any given society is socially and psychologically determined. That means it is also historically determined and it is culturally determined, right? I'm sure in this classroom, many of us in the same batch, in the same university, in the same city, come from various different cultures. and would have various different understandings of what it means to be a man or a woman or a transgender or a gay or a lesbian. Gender is therefore learned through a process of socialization and through the culture of the particular society concerned. I hope that after the inaugural session, maybe during the breaks, or even after the whole seminar is done today, each one of you in your groups of friends or with your faculties reflect on this point. That when did, I again do this as a random experiment in the classroom. Maybe I'll take one or two answers right now. When did you first realize you're a man or you're a woman, or you were told that, okay, this is my gender? How old were you? Was there any incident? Would anyone like to say? When did you realize, okay, I'm being made to, okay, I'm a girl and I have to do this or I can't do this? Or I'm a boy and I have to do this or I can't do this? Was it during your childhood? Was it during your growing up years? Was it now? Would anyone like to share? Yeah?
When normally for women, it's after they get their first period, so then their mother and their family as a community would tell them, or as their culture would tell them, now you are a woman. So
and the whole ceremony behind it also, right? Right? So I lived earlier in North India, and then when I came down to South India, and I was seeing those ceremonies, and my daughter growing up here was like, wow, they're giving gold and they're giving saris, and they're like, okay, you get gifts because you got your first period. I just put it on my Instagram story yesterday. There's an NGO which is calling in men to sit and put instruments on their stomach and feel what it feels like to get the period cramps, right? So that they understand the idea of the pain that the girls go through every month, right? And it's an experiment, and you should see that video. It's crazy, right? Anyone else? One more answer. When did you realize through a socialization process that this is what it is to be a man, or this is what it is to be a woman? And if there are others from the other genders in this audience who would like to speak up, please do. Anyone? Then I have a male perspective. I'm going to talk a lot about the male today. When did you think that, okay, this is what I have to do because I'm a boy? Yeah, guys? Don't feel shy. Subramanya sir and I are very modern here. See, anybody? You realize I had a boy in the classroom, in my classroom. He came and said, you know, ma'am, we are tired of being told at home we are just UG students, that we have to finish, we have to find a job, and we have to start taking care of our family. That pressure. Because we are the male children in the house, right? So men usually, boys don't say that. But then that is also what's taught to them because they are men. If girls are told, oh, you will be married off, then the boys are told that you will have to take care. That burden of being a caregiver is a very important male construct. So in many cultures, boys are encouraged in acts that display male traits, and girls vice versa, though the toy is given to the children. Tell me something, I'm really honestly asking you, if you are invited to a birthday party of a 2-year-old girl, would you buy a gun and gift it to her? No. If you are invited to the birthday party of a 1-year-old boy, would you buy a doll and take as a gift? We wouldn't, right? It's so ingrained in our heads. We willingly don't do it, right? So, think about that. It's also there in the kind of discipline that we mete out. We don't hesitate. Moms, my sister-in-law is raising a brat of a 13-year-old boy, and she doesn't just gives him left, right, center. And I'm like the bua who's saving him all the time. She says, Mona, don't come in way. Boy, isko mujhe jab tak main do thappad nahi marungi, theek nahi hoga ye. Right? She has an elder daughter also, but she's like, no, with the boy, I will have to whack him. Now again, okay, you may have empirical evidence to prove, that's the only way boys learn. But then, we do this, right? We do it with we do this in our growing up years. The jobs and the careers to which they might aspire for. Okay? My niece, I have a younger sister, we're two siblings. I have one daughter, my sister has one daughter. My niece is now 18. Since she was an early teenager, she knew she wants to be a pilot and there's nothing changing her mind, right? She knows she's going to fly a plane. That's it. Now, nobody in the house ever told her that that's not something that she cannot do. Right? Now, if we know in our Indian, and not just Indian, in South Asian societies, we definitely mark out some careers which are just for girls and some careers which are just for boys. Let her be a teacher, it's a safe thing, she can get married and she can continue doing that. Let her do home sciences, right? It has taken a very long time for women. Please remember, though today 2025 you may not think so, but it's taken a very long time for women to break the barrier to get into engineering classrooms, to get into MBBS classrooms. I had this wonderful lady, Dr. Shukla Bose, who's the CEO of the Parikrama Foundation in Bangalore. At age 65, she did her PhD with me and she was awarded last year at JAIN University. She was one of the first women of IIM Bangalore and she remembers her classroom. Right? So, there was a time, I want you all to remember the context, definitely not in 2025, that the jobs and the careers defined whether you're a boy or a girl, right? And of course, the biggest thing today, the portrayal of men and women in media. It's changing very little, I would say. The Saas Bahu serials still remain in the same manner somewhere or the other, perpetrating patriarchy, perpetrating the traditional roles, telling you what a man should be doing and what a girl should be doing. Right? So, it's a vicious cycle. We say reality feeds media, but the media also adds up and perpetrates the real stereotypes that we have. Okay?
यार मैं खेलने जा रही हूँ। नहीं आज नहीं। क्यों? आज तो मुझे किचन में हेल्प करोगी। कोई मम्मी नहीं। अरे वाला तुम चले जाओ। नीचे मिल जाएगा तुम्हें खेलने के लिए कोई। क्या पापा आप जाओ ना इसके साथ? मैं भी जाऊँ? नहीं बोला ना। बेटा घर का काम भी सीख ले। नहीं तो लोग क्या कहेंगे? माँ ने कुछ नहीं सिखाया। लड़कियों को ये सब आना चाहिए।
So, what is the point that the previous video just ends with, right? That inequality actually gets learned. When we talk of gender equality or inequality, we may say, oh, this has always happened, it has always stayed, this is how society works, this is how our norms work. But it's high time all of us stand and accept that we are teaching it. It's not existing somewhere in the air, right? We can just click and it can disappear. Why? When we stop perpetrating it. Nothing stops us to take that one splitting moment to tell ourselves that from today we won't do it, right? In this video, the mother, in a way, it's a very simple, casual drawing room conversation. Where you're saying that no, the girl needs to stay back. And let me tell you, and today, my mom, and I laugh about it, my mom has also done this with me. We never had a brother in the house. But then growing up, yes, I had finished my homework and I would run to play, and she'd be like, no. You have to make the last 5 rotis in the kitchen, learn how to do it, and then you go out to meet your friends or play. And I used to be so angry, my teenage anger out at her. Though when I got married and when I was running my home, I told her thank you because I can close my eyes and make chapatis. I've learnt it so well. That's a different deal. But nobody wanted to do it that way, right? Her point was you must learn how to do it because girls need to know. So, and I use this example with due consent. After our marriage, when my mother-in-law first came to stay in our house and she saw her son doing the dishes, she cried. She's like, what a witch of a daughter-in-law do I have? She's making my son do the dishes. And he had to have a full conversation with his mother that, ma, I'm doing this willingly. You know, we are a modern couple, we share domestic responsibilities, but it was unheard of, right? Because nobody told her that her sons should also be in the kitchen. But then, and let me also tell you, she still didn't learn. She would make sure every day, when I would go to work and he would go to work, that by the time we both came back, everything was done in the kitchen so that her son would not have to enter the kitchen. Right? So the fact is that that was her way of coping, because she was too old to learn something new, right? But then we can change it. And that is where I come to the most important point, that what are the cultural norms today when we deal with not just women's rights or gender, but I'll put the spotlight on the word masculinity, and I'll also put an adjective next to it and call it toxic masculinity. How many of you have heard of these two words, toxic masculinity? Please raise your hands. Excellent, thank you, very good. We need to today, where we are standing, understand how this toxic masculinity is perpetrating gender-based violence. You may hang rapists, you may do whatever you want with them. The fact is that death penalty has not stopped it. Our legal system has not stopped it. The sexual perversion that is causing gender-based violence of little girls and little boys to even older women is continuing. Not just in your and my society, but all over the world, right? So, what is the root cause of this gender-based violence? What is this emotional repression which leads to it, and inequality which is affecting all genders? We need to therefore deconstruct these harmful societal norms and work towards promoting healthier, inclusive gender identities through education, media, and community engagement. Okay, let me take a brief pause. Are you all with me till now? Does anybody have any urgent thoughts that you must speak out till you wait till the end? Would you like to say anything? Anyone? Shall we move on? So, let's look squarely and wholly at the terms masculinity, gender, and men. And I'll do this through 4 themes in the lecture today. We look at how we stereotype men. We look at how there is also sexual abuse of men. We will look at the quote-unquote burden of masculinity, and we shall look at toxic masculinity. In gender studies, each of these, when I'm speaking today, there's a lot of overlap in all these 4 categories, but you will also see how they're different. And it's important for us to address each of these individually. What do we mean when we stereotype men, therefore? So stereotyping men involves making generalized and often oversimplified assumptions about how men think, behave, or feel solely based on the gender. So you have a guy who's a friend in your group and say, "Arey wo to aise hi karega, he's a boy, he's a man," right? You're not giving the man to speak for himself. You are stereotyping, you're saying because he is a man, this is how he's supposed to think. You're a man, how did you not think that way, right? Or you're a man, how did you dare behave this way? Or boys will be boys, hashtag, right? And how are we supposed to, the word we don't talk about, feel? These stereotypes can be both positive and negative, but even the positive stereotypes can be limiting or harmful because they kind of ignore the individual differences amongst the men. So, what are these some of the common stereotypes about the men? Emotionally stoic. Boys don't cry, right? Men are supposed to be strong. Men are supposed to be emotionally stoic. Men are stereotyped as being emotional, unemotional, less capable of expressing feelings. That is what we think. And that is what society expects men to be. Right?
Ma'am,
Yeah.
there is no value for tears of men. There is no value.
Oh, that's a very cool line. Tell me more. Let's give him some space to speak, please. Yeah.
If one woman cries here, everybody's attention will turn to that woman.
I agree with you.
But if one man cries, oh, he's crying, baby.
Absolutely. See how, what a beautiful point. Can we please put our hands together? You know what? He's right. When we see laws which favor rights for women, and I'm sure you all are lawyers, they are misused by women. This is the first way women do it, right? You're in a police station, you're in a society, or you start crying with 10 women, 10 people around you, and you know everybody will immediately go and ask, oh, what happened, who did this for you? But the truth is, in 2025, we are sitting in a Bangalore classroom, and this boy has the courage to say, there is no value for a man's tears. This can be a Hindi movie line, but you know, the fact is that it is the truth. He is absolutely right. Do we even think? And that is why then they therefore sadly shed no tears. There is no value. Good. Now what is another stereotype? Oh, that he's a man, he will be aggressive, he will be dominant. And there is a widespread belief that men are naturally more aggressive and men are naturally more competitive. Okay? We believe in these stereotypes. Again, the traditional roles, that they are the providers, they are the protectors. Today, if there is a family and the man loses his job and the woman goes out to earn, society does not look at her as a provider or a protector. The man may be sitting in the house, they will still come and ask the man the decisions. She may be going to the office and bringing all the money back, right? And running the house. But the head of the household will be the man. Because how can the woman or the wife be the protector or the provider? And I'm sure you all know too, and I definitely know so many families and households where it's the woman who is the protector and the provider. You don't have to be a widow or a single woman to do it. Okay? You can be married and it could be still the woman who's doing it. But our stereotype is that we expect only men to be the providers or the protectors. The whole trope about your bhaiya Rakhi bandi hai and he's going to protect you, you know, starting from the Draupadi and the Krishna thing in the Mahabharata, right? So in our house, and let me proudly tell you, we sisters tie Rakhis on each other. We love celebrating Rakhi, and we definitely do it among sisters also. Right? You don't need a man for it. Now, sex-driven. Media portrays men as being constantly focused on sex or unable to form deep emotional connections. Oh, the guy is looking at the girl, he must be simply disrobing her and thinking about sex with her only. How can he think emotionally about her? This is a stereotype, okay, which we all need to bust. And like my late mother-in-law, she was a lovely lady. Oh, uninterested in parenting or domestic roles. Right? Men are frequently stereotyped as being less involved or incompetent in caregiving or household responsibilities. We raise our men like that, right? My brother is a person like that. So even now he has 2 children and I have to come in and push him because his wife is always complaining to me. He doesn't do half the housework. He puts up his hand and says, but no one taught me, I don't know how to do it. Right? Who's stopping you to start now? So, these stereotypes, why does it matter? What happens when we stereotype men? Stereotyping men can limit emotional expression and mental health care. You are not ready to believe that the men can think or act other ways. You think they will only be like this, right? We are the ones who are putting these limits. We are pressurizing men into roles that they don't want or they may not be suited for. Hear it from their end, think about it from their point of view also. And then we also harm relationships by fostering unrealistic expectations. Half the counseling that happens with couples today is because of these expectations. I had a lovely boy who was such an active participant in all the activities we did in our gender course, and who at the end, on the last day, his feedback was, ma'am, for 4 months, I have a wonderful girlfriend who's way richer than me, who's way more qualified, she's going to do better than me, she's going to earn more than me, and I used to keep thinking I'm going to have an insecurity complex. And today I'm like, okay, let her do it better than me. How does it matter? It doesn't matter at all. And what does this all do? It also contributes to toxic masculinity and gender inequality. At the end of the day, this gender inequality also exists for men. Let's look at the second point, sexual abuse of men. Please don't think only little girls or young girls get raped. It also happens with boys, and it also happens with men. And what does it involve? Sexual abuse of men can include rape, sexual assault, coercion into sexual acts, childhood sexual abuse, sexual harassment, exploitation or trafficking. And what are the myths, therefore, which silence the male survivors? We know today that you don't have women rape victims coming up and talking, or gender-based violence victims who are women coming and talking about their, horrors. But then, men are even more silent when it comes to sexual abuse of men. Because what are these myths? Oh, men can't be raped. Legally and biologically false, men can be raped and sexually assaulted. Oh, it's a boy or a man. If he didn't fight back, then he definitely wanted it. He must be gay. He wanted it. Victims often freeze or comply out of fear, confusion, or trauma. And I'm talking for those male survivors, right? Oh, look at another myth. Real men, if he's a man, real men then definitely can protect themselves. Because this is again a myth. Abuse isn't about strength, it's about coercion, it's about manipulation, it's about power. Only gay men are abused. Abuse can happen to all men, regardless of sexual orientation. Oh, like rape or sexual abuse doesn't affect men as much. That again is a myth. Male survivors suffer from PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and relationship difficulties, just like female survivors. And so, what are the barriers to the reporting when it comes to sexual abuse of men? Of course, fear of not being believed. If you think women sexual abuse survivors don't get, believed, definitely it's the same thing there with men. The shame or confusion about sexuality. Oh, you're a man and you were raped? Of course there's shame with that. The lack of male-specific support services, we still feel a huge lack there coming in. And there is cultural stigma, the masculinity norms that we just spoke about. The legal systems, you are a better audience to understand this, are often ill-equipped to handle male cases. And therefore, we must move towards support and healing here. Therapy, trauma-informed counseling, including male-specific support groups, hotlines and organizations for male survivors, and more importantly, community support. Speaking out, if safe and desired, it can be healing and empowering. Let's move to the third point now. The burden of masculinity, right? We spoke about stereotypes, we spoke about sexual abuse. What are some of the core aspects of what we call today the burden of masculinity? This is a burden because you are taught that this is how you're supposed to behave as a man, and the first thing is emotional suppression. Men are often taught, because as our friend said, the tears have no value, right? You therefore internalize and you're taught to hide your vulnerability, avoid crying, or you suppress your fear. Expressing emotions like sadness or anxiety may be seen as a sign of weakness when we're talking at it through men. This of course leads to higher depression, suicide, or cases of mental health issues, which often remain untreated. And another burden of masculinity is you are expected that you must be in control. You are expected that you have to be dominant. Men are expected to be leaders, to be providers or protectors. Being in control financially, emotionally, physically is often seen, therefore, as a sign of manhood. And it can create immense stress, burnout, and conflict in relationships. I'm loving the nods I'm seeing in the audience here from the boys, right? And then the fear of appearing unmanly. Men may avoid hobbies, jobs, or fashion choices which are perceived as feminine. The peer pressure can silence self-expression and authenticity. And then, we also spoke about this earlier, the sexual expectations. Men are often assumed to always want sex or be sexually dominant. You see so many of this in your commonplace media where the women are talking that, oh, that is what the man must be wanting, right? That is what the man must be thinking. And that's again what the men think, oh, the women must be thinking this, right? And this therefore ends up all creating unrealistic standards and can lead to shame, performance anxiety, or difficulty with consent. Again, there is work or success pressure. Success and self-worth are often tied to status, career, money. Job loss, financial struggle, failure can feel like a personal identity crisis. Then, violence becomes a coping mechanism, very sadly. Anger often becomes the only acceptable emotion for men to express. And look at the high TRP ratings and the money a movie like Animal makes, right? Because that is totally endorsed. And this can result in unhealthy outlets like aggression, substance abuse, and even domestic violence. What are the consequences, therefore? Obviously, for men who have to bear this burden, there is isolation, there is loneliness, there is difficulty in forming closer relationships, there is reluctance to seek help, medical, emotional, or legal. There is perpetuation of toxic masculinity, gender inequality. And how do we address the burden? Promoting emotional literacy and vulnerability in boys and men. And if I can only highlight this word and this term over and over again, can we accept it and can we promote this? We need to expand the definitions of masculinity to include empathy, care, collaboration. We need to encourage mental health support without stigma. We need to redefine the idea of strength to include resilience, openness, and kindness. Because challenging the burden of masculinity doesn't mean we are rejecting manhood, it means freeing men from unrealistic and damaging expectations. And so, toxic masculinity, therefore, is this concept, this cultural concept of manhood that promotes domination, emotional repression, and aggression as being the key traits of being quote-unquote the real man. It doesn't mean that masculinity by itself is toxic. Please note there's a fine dividing line here. Rather, it highlights how some very harmful notions of traditional masculinity can damage men, women, and society. Quickly, finally, the core traits of this. These traits, in fact, are often glorified or expected in many unhealthy ways. Again, as I said, emotional suppression. The belief that men should not show vulnerability like crying or asking for help. This leads to poor emotional health, isolation, mental illness, aggression and dominance. We equate manhood with control, violence, power over others. This ends up normalizing bullying, abuse, coercion as acceptable male behaviors. believes that men should pursue sex relentlessly or that sexual conquest equals status. It fuels disrespect, objectification, and sometimes sexual violence. It also breeds homophobia, misogyny, devaluing anything that is perceived as feminine or non-heterosexual. The pressures that men face, therefore, to prove their masculinity by distancing themselves from anything that is deemed as weak. Rejection of help. Seeking therapy, support, or vulnerability is unmanly. You will not want to do it. This leads to untreated trauma, substance abuse, even higher suicide rates often amongst men. And so finally, we see the consequences of toxic masculinity impact not just men and women, but the whole of society. For men, of course, depression, anxiety, violence, burnout, shallow relationships. For women, increased risk of harassment, abuse, inequality. And for society, reinforced gender roles, cycles of violence, and emotional disconnection. And I would like to end by saying that it's high time today, therefore, we look at toxic versus healthy masculinity. While toxic masculinity will tell you real men don't cry, or we always have to be dominant, sex equals power, never show weakness, healthy masculinity will speak out and say that emotions are human, they're not gendered. Healthy masculinity will say leadership includes empathy and respect, that consent and connection matters, that vulnerability builds strength. And finally, therefore, I'd like to just end with this, again, another short video to take if any questions or comments if we have time. Yes.
The first thing that you said about America was a Donald Trump that there are only two genders.
Yeah, Donald Trump said that.
I disagree with you on that part. I said that there should be many genders, we should identify many genders. The thing I will give you why I disagree with you, if tomorrow I will identify myself as a woman, is there any woman willing to go in washroom with me? Are you guys?
Yeah, complete your sense. Complete what you're saying.
Yes, with one of my known guys, she went to washroom and there was a person who identified as a she. So there's a person.
Just let him complete, guys. Yeah.
Assaulted her in the washroom. So if you said in the beginning that's a psychological effect, it's not a biological effect. Sex is biological effect, but your gender is psychological effect. So what if my psychologist is okay? I need to do this because
Have you traveled in an airplane?
What?
Have you traveled in an aircraft?
Yeah, ma'am.
There's only one bathroom, right, for everybody?
There's two washrooms. Yeah.
Yeah, but is it male, female?
Yeah.
Everybody goes to the same one, right?
Yes.
Nobody has a choice there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But-
So this example that you're creating in your head, and trying to tell here, and first, your first sentence. Can I have your name?
Farad.
Farad, yeah. You do not suddenly decide and say, if I think tomorrow, I'll say I'm a woman. People don't switch genders like this, right? The difference that we began with, that how sex is determined by birth, but gender is more of a socialized thing, right? Is because there are many people who do not identify with either being the male gender or the female gender, and they would like to come out and say they are either LGBTQI plus whatever. You don't. I know there is someone in my family, and we know amongst our friends, who were born as a girl, but then later have discovered that they identify as the male gender and may want to go through a sex change surgery also. It's huge. It's not just you suddenly thinking, what if I today say I'm a girl and will someone come into the washroom, will be okay, right? This is not what it is and what we are talking about here also. I'm sure Sasu ma'am will also talk about a lot of issues here in her session, but this is not when we talk about whether it's male or female. Traditionally, and what Donald Trump did took America back centuries to where they had been here today. is saying that there are so many Americans today living on American soil who are LGBTQI+. But today, their president is telling them that I refuse to acknowledge your alternative gender, and you can either be a man or you can either be a woman. So at one go, we have the politician who's the president of a country who is denying the right to a sexual identity to so many of his own citizens. Ma'am, would you like to add to this very pertinent question?
Madam, if I may.
I think I have 1 second, yeah. Ma'am, please cover, please.
I mean, I completely understand what you're saying, and you know, the thing is, it's not something that is new. This has been around for a long time. That people, you know, are seen as men, seen as women, but who identify with the opposite, or even consider themselves to be non-binary. And traditionally, you know, these are groups that have been historically vulnerable. They're not taking advantage of anything, but they have been discriminated against and disadvantaged for a very long period of time. And it's important to understand this, because I remember talking to, you know, a very well-educated crowd, and one woman about children and how to, you know, when they, you know, come out to their parents, how to react. And she said, oh, I don't believe this, you know, one day my daughter will come and say, I want to be a boy. Tomorrow she may come and say, I want to be a dog or cat or something like that. You know, I was so shocked. I just stood at that, and then everyone started laughing, which is a reaction. But, you know, all this trivializes what is really a very important issue. I mean, I've, you know, taught at the National Law School for 30 years, and we have had, like, a student, I remember, Priya Tangaraja from Sri Lanka, who, you know, identified as, you know, as queer herself. And because of, you know, the difficulty she faced, she finally took her own life. And this is not uncommon. If you look at gender non-binary people, the rate of suicide among them is so high. So washroom is the last thing they're thinking of. They're thinking of just being able to live, you know, exactly, with rights. So when you're talking about a washroom, I mean, it's absolutely a good question. And the way that some universities address it, and what we did at the National Law School then, and I'm trying to now do at Manipal also, is that we have some washrooms which are, you know, labeled as gender neutral washrooms or all gender washrooms. If you go again to take the airport example, you know, airplane example, there is only one washroom. If you go to an airport, there will be one for men and one for women. And earlier there used to be only one for people with disabilities. That is also gender neutral. You know, now you have for women with disabilities, men for disabilities separately. But we also need to move towards a place which is gender neutral. Now, violence against women can happen anywhere. By, of course, men in public washrooms which are generally unsafe. So, for instance, there have been cases where, you know, buses stop in the middle of the night for women and men to use a washroom, and most women will never go alone to a washroom because you don't know if some man will be waiting there to assault you. So I think the issue is not that somebody is going to take advantage of. You know, the fact is that this group has been highly marginalized for a long period of time, and they're not trying to take advantage of. They're just trying to live, to survive, and, you know, to keep their sanity. And, you know, and to be constantly pointed at and told you are wrong, there's something wrong with you and you're evil by a lot of religious leaders. I mean, it's extremely depressing to people, and, you know, it leads them to take things like taking the life. So understand your problem, but remember that, you know, those who belong to the LGBTQI community, they are marginalized people. They're not trying to take advantage of the system. Okay?
They need the basic rights. Yeah. We have one more hand here. Yeah. Thank you.
First and foremost, thank you, madam, for the introductory session. Very comprehensive. My question is, and I also apologize if my colleague came off as a bit too passionate. My question is, at what age can you reasonably allow a person to determine what gender they are? Just to cite the American example, just to cite the American example, they're letting children at the age of 8 undergo sex change operations and hormonal reassignment. So I would like your opinion on the matter.
I think so.
When can we consider it reasonable to allow a person to say, oh, I feel like this or like that? Not in a conventional sense, but with respect to minors stating that I feel different than what I was assigned at.
Thank you. I have a straight answer for it because in societies like ours, first of all, it takes a very long time for someone to come out and be able to say it. And I've usually seen that empirical evidence says much later in life. We are not America where an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old may have the courage to come and tell their children in an Indian society. I don't think so we have any instances of that at all. So whenever you really have the courage, but I would like to ask, do we have a legal clause as to the age, exact age in India?
Generally with parental consent, you can...
Once you're an adult, right? Sex change surgery, yeah.
Parental consent at 16.
Yeah, the sex change surgery with parental consent. So that is the biggest hurdle, right? To let your parents know and for them to approve with it also and give their consent for it.
My question is more regarding the opinion on the matter. Should minors below a certain age group be allowed to undergo such operations, or would it be better to make them...
I think so that's a medical decision, and first of all the most important thing is consent. And if the medical system is willing to do it and things that, see, we've had abortions of girls, we've had to allow it if it's, very, very, serious and the girl cannot take it. And if it's an, unwanted pregnancy because of rape or something like that, right? So you don't think you will do that to an underage woman or a girl, but then when you reach such a...
based on circumstances.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you for the
But for
opinion.
intersex babies, it's done at birth itself.
Yeah, yes. Are we able to see that short video? We try? Because I think so this is very, very important for us to even understand what we're talking about.
Speaking of gender equality, according to section 65, punishment for rape to minors. Okay. If a minor girl and a minor boy had been sexually intercourse with them, who are considered as who is victim and who is offender in this case?
I'll be dealing with that in any...
Ma'am is dealing with that, yeah. The next section you will have your answer to that question, don't worry.
Thank you.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off. What I actually think she's trying to say is making the same old excuses. Boys will be boys, boys will be boys, boys will be boys. But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
That's what she says. And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men. Men need to hold other men accountable. Wow, sweetie. Come on. To say the right thing. To act the right way. Some already are. In ways big. No, big. And small. But some is not enough. Someone treat each other, okay? Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Thank you.